Can everyone hear me? How's it going? I realize that the microphone's not quite right now. There we go. How's this? How's everyone doing? Everyone doing okay? How's the microphone? Is it alright? Oh crap, my face tracker's not working. Yeah, I got it. Just gotta reset the app. So, how's everyone doing? Can everyone hear me just fine? I hope so. There we go, now it's tracking. So, I'll get my glasses on real quick so I can read this book here. And I think the music's just a bit too loud, right? Yeah, this is fine, right? I think this is a good setting here. What page were we on? Was it 27? I think it was like 27 or 28. We were on chapter 4, correct? Something about flowers in the doorway. Well, I guess we can, while I'm searching for where we are, talk about how things were going today for me. And my day went pretty well, actually. Not much actually happened today. I woke up, I cut the grass, we did a whole bunch of moving the dirt around, putting mulch on the ground, that kind of thing. Kind of waited all day for it to rain. It didn't rain. It was supposed to, but it didn't. Bunch of bull crap. I had to go water all that. I mean, it's too late to water them now. I really should have watered them. I watered the stuff that needs water just in case something like this happened. And it did, so I'm glad. I'm glad I watered everything that needed watered. Another thing I did was I played a bunch of Infinite Wordle because I was procrastinating cutting the grass, so I was playing Wordle. As if that's like an excuse or anything. I got off my butt and did it eventually, though, and that's all that matters, right? Alright, so I think I know where we are. Alright, we're gonna start reading. From page 23. And the start of the new paragraph. In the previous reading, our hero, or protagonist, not sure if he is a hero yet, he arrived in the very distant future, and there was a bunch of dwarf people, not actual dwarves, but small pink people who seem to be very unintelligent and think he is the reincarnation of their sun god or something. Now they were taking him into a building, and we leave off from there. Oh, one random thought. I realized that I think I saw a movie based on this book a long time ago when I was a kid, or I read this book for class. One of those two things happened. I I remembered that last time we were reading this because of the small people. I realized that this was adapted into a movie because of the small pink people. And I'm not gonna spoil what I do remember. I don't remember anything after this yet, though, so maybe the rest of this book will jog my memory. Who knows? Alright. Reading now. The arch of the doorway was richly carved, but naturally I did not observe the carving very narrowly, though I fancied I saw suggestions of old Phoenician decorations as I passed through, and it struck me that they were very badly broken and weather-worn. Several more brightly clad people met me in the doorway, and so we entered, I, dressed in dingy 19th century garments, looking grotesque enough, garlanded with flowers and surrounded by an eddying mass of bright, soft-colored robes and shining white limbs. In a melodious whirl of laughter and laughing speech. The big doorway opened into a proportionately great hall hung with brown. The roof was enshadowed, and the windows partially glazed with colored glass and partially unglazed, admitted a tempered light. The floor was made up of huge blocks of some very hard white metal, not plates nor slabs, blocks, and it was so much worn, as I judged by the going to and fro of past generations, as to be deeply channeled along the more frequented ways. Transverse to the length were innumerable tables made of slabs of polished stone, raised perhaps a foot off from the floor, and upon these were heaps of fruits. Some I recognized as a kind of hypertrophied raspberry and orange, but for the most part they were strange. Between the tables was scattered a great number of cushions. Upon these my conductors seated themselves, signing for me to do likewise. With pretty absence of ceremony, they began to eat the fruit with their hands, flinging peel and stalks, and so forth, into the round openings in the side of the tables. I was not loath to follow their example, for I felt thirsty and hungry. As I did so, I surveyed the hall at my leisure. And perhaps the thing that struck me the most was its dilapidated look. The stained glass windows, which displayed only a geometrical pattern, were broken in many places, and the curtains that hung across the lower end were thick with dust. And it caught my eye that the corner of the marble table near me was fractured. Nevertheless, the general effect was extremely rich and picturesque. There were, perhaps, a couple of 100 people dining in the hall, and most of them, seated as near to me as they could come, were watching me with interest, their little eyes shining over the fruit they were eating. All were clad in the same soft and yet strong, silky material. Fruit, by the by, was all their diet. These people of the remote future were strict vegetarians, and while I was with them, in spite of some carnal cravings, I had to be frugi- frugivorous also. Frug- frugivorous, as in fruit carnivorous. Very funny author. Indeed, I found afterwards that horses, cattle, sheep, dogs had followed the Ichthyosaurus into extinction. But the fruits were very delightful. One in particular that seemed to be in season all the time I was there, a flowery thing in a three-sided husk, was especially good, and I made it my staple. As first I was puzzled by all these strange fruits, and by the strange flowers I saw, but later I began to perceive they are important. However, I'm telling all you of my fruit dinner in the distant future now. So soon as my appetite was a little checked, I determined to make a resolute attempt to learn the speech of these new men of mine. Clearly, that was the next thing to do. The fruits seemed a convenient thing to be given upon, and holding one of these up, I began a series of interrogative sounds and gestures. I had some considerable difficulty in conveying my meaning. At first, my efforts were met with a stare of surprise or inextinguishable laughter. Sorry, these words getting cut off a lot here. I zoomed out and lost my place. One moment. There we are. Okay, I clicked on the page and it took me away again for some reason. That's really annoying. Okay. At first, my efforts were met with a stare of surprise or inextinguishable laughter. But presently, a fair-haired little creature seemed to grasp my intention and repeated a name. They had to chatter and explain the business at great length to each other, and my first attempts to make the exquisite little sounds of their language caused an immense amount of amusement. However, I felt like a schoolmaster amidst children, and persisted, and presently I had a score of noun substantiatives, at least at my command. And then I got to demonstrative pronouns, and even the verb to eat. But it was slow work, and the little people soon tired and wanted to get away from my interrogations. So I determined, rather of necessity, to let them give their lessons in little doses when they felt inclined. And very little doses I found they were before long. For I never met people with more indolent or more easily fatigued. A queer thing I soon discovered about my little hosts, and that was their lack of interests. They would come to me with eager cries of astonishment like children, but like children they would soon stop examining me and wander away after some other toy. The dinner and my conversational beginnings ended, I noted for the first time that almost all those who had surrounded me at first were gone. It was odd, too, how speedily I came to be disregarded. These little people. I went out through the portal into the sunlit world again, as soon as my hunger was satisfied. I was continually meeting more of these men of the future, who would follow me a little distance, chatter and laugh about me, and, having smiled and gesticulated in a friendly way, leave me again to my own devices. The calm evening upon the world as I emerged from the great hall, and the scene was lit by the warm glow of the setting sun. At first, things were very confusing. Everything was so entirely different from the world I had known, even the flowers. Man's really obsessed with those, huh? The big building I had left was situated on the slope of a broad river valley, but the Thames had shifted perhaps a mile from its present position. I resolved to mount the summit of a crest, perhaps a mile and a half away, from which I would get a wider view of this our planet in the year 800 and 2701 AD. For that, I should explain, was the date the little dials of my machine recorded. As I had walked, I was watching for every impression that would possibly help to explain the condition of the ruinous splendor in which I found the world. For ruinous it was. A little way up the hill, for instance, was a great heap of granite, bound together by masses of aluminum, a vast labyrinth of precipitous walls and crumbled heaps, amidst which were thick heaps of very beautiful pagoda-like plants, nestled possibly, but wonderfully tinted with brown about the leaves and incapable of stinging. It was evidently the derelict remains of some vast structure, to what end built I could not determine. It was here that I was destined, at a later date, to have a very strange experience. The first intimidation of a still stranger discovery, but of that I will speak in its proper place. Looking round with a sudden thought, from a terrace on which I restricted for a while, I realized that there was no small houses to be seen. Apparently, the single house, and possibly even the household, had vanished. Here and there among the greenery were palace-like buildings, but the house and the cottage, which form such characteristic features of our own English landscape, had disappeared. Communism, I said to myself. What? And on the heels of that came another thought. I looked at the half-dozen little figures that were following me. Then, in a flash, I perceived that all had the same form of costume, the same soft hairless visage, and the same girlish rotundity of limb. It may seem strange, perhaps, that I had not noticed this before, but everything was so strange. Now, I saw the fact plainly enough. In costume, and in all the differences of texture and bearing that now marked off the sexes from each other, these people of the future were alike, and the children seemed, to my eyes, to be put the miniatures of their parents. I judged then that the children of that time were extremely precocious, physically at least, and I found afterwards abundant verification of my opinion. Seeing the ease and security in which these people were living, I felt that this close resemblance of the sexes was, after all, what one would expect. Hello, Shrimp 4 VTubers, welcome. For the strength of a man and the softness of a woman, the institution of the family, and the differentiation of occupations are mere militant necessities of an age of physical force. Where population is balanced and abundant, much like childbearing becomes an evil rather than a blessing to the state, where violence comes but rarely and offspring are secure, there is less necessity. Indeed, there is no necessity for an efficient family, and the specialization of sexes with reference to their children's needs disappears. We see some beginnings of this even in our own time, and in this future age it was complete. This, I must remind you, was my speculation at the time. Later, I was to appreciate how far it fell short of the reality. While I was musing upon these things, my attention was attracted by a pretty little structure. Like a well that was under a cupola. I thought in a transitory way of the oddness of the well still existing, and then resumed the thread of my speculations. There were no large buildings towards the top of the hill, and as my walking powers were evidently miraculous, I was presently left alone for the first time. With a strange sense of freedom and adventure, I pushed on up to the crest. I hope you're doing well, Shrimp for VTubers. We're currently reading The Time Machine, and we are in chapter 4. I hope you enjoy, and I hope you get comfy. There, I found a seat of some yellow metal that I did not recognize, corroded in places with a kind of pinkish rust and half smothered in soft moss. The armrests cast and filed into the resemblance of a griffin's head. I sat down on it and surveyed the broad view of our old world under the sunset that long day. It was as sweet and fair as view as I have ever seen. The sun had already gone below the horizon, and the west was flaming gold, touched with some horizontal bars of purple and crimson. Below the valley of the Thames, in which the river lay like a band of burnished steel, I have already spoken of the great places dotted about among the variegated greenery, some in ruins and some still occupied. Here and there rose a white or silvery figure in the waste garden of the earth. Here and there came the sharp vertical line of some cupola, however you pronounce that, or obelisk. There were no hedges, no signs of proprietary rights, no evidences of agriculture. The whole earth had become a garden. So, watching, I began to put my interpretation upon the things that I had seen, and as it shaped itself to me that evening, my interpretation was something in this way. Afterward, I found I had gotten only half-truth, or only a glimpse of one facet of the truth. It seemed to me that I had happened upon humanity upon the wane. The ruddy sunset set me thinking of the sunset of mankind. For the first time, I began to realize an odd consequence of the social efforts in which we are present engaged. I'm trying to find my reading voice right now, sorry. And yet, come to think, it is a logical consequence enough. Strength is the outcome of need. Security sets the premium on feebleness. The work of... Oh my gosh, what the heck is this word? Ameliorating the conditions of life. The work of ameliorating the conditions of life. The true civilizing process which makes life more and more secure had gone steadily on to a climax. One moment, I think I gotta do some vocal warm-ups because I'm voice cracking all over the place. Okay, I think I got it. I think I've got my voice under control. Had gone steadily on to a climax. One triumph of a united humanity over another. Over nature had followed another. Things that are now a mere dreams had become projects deliberately put in hand and carried forward. And the harvest was what I saw. After all, the sensation and the agriculture of today are still in the rudimentary stage. The science of our time has attacked but a little department of the field of human disease. But even so, it spreads its operation steadily and persistently. Our agriculture and horticulture destroy a weed just here and there and cultivate perhaps a score or so of wholesome plants, leaving the greater number to fight out a balance as they can. We improve our favorite plants and animals, and how few they are, gradually by selective breeding. Now a new and better peach, now a seedless grape, now a sweeter and larger flower, now a more convenient breed of cattle. We improve them gradually because our ideals are vague and tentative, and our knowledge is very limited, because nature too is shy and slow in our clumsy hands. Someday, all this will be better organized and still better. That is the drift of the current in the spite of the eddies. The whole world will be intelligent, educated, and cooperating. Things will move faster and faster towards the subjugation of nature. In the end, wisely and carefully, we shall readjust the balance of animal and vegetable life to suit our human needs. This adjustment, I say, must have been done and done well, done indeed for all time. In the space of time across which my machine had leaped, the air was free from gnats, the earth from weeds or fungi. Everywhere were fruits and sweet and delightful flowers. Brilliant butterflies flew hither and thither. The ideal of preventive medicine was attained. Diseases had been stamped out. I saw no evidence of contagious disease during all my stay, and I shall have to tell you later that even the process of putrefaction and decay had been profoundly affected by these changes. Social triumphs, too, had been affected. I saw mankind housed in splendid shelters, gloriously clothed, and yet I had found them engaged in no toil. There were no signs of struggle, neither social nor economical struggle. The shop, the advertisement, the traffic, all that commerce which constitutes the body of our world was gone. It was natural on that golden evening that I should jump at the idea of social paradise. The difficulty of increasing population had been met, I guessed, and population had ceased to increase. But with this change in condition comes inevitably adaptations to the change. What, unless biological science is a mass of errors, is the cause of human intelligence and vigor? Hardship and freedom, the conditions under which the active, strong, and subtle survive and the weaker go to the wall. Conditions that put a premium upon the loyal alliance of capable men, upon the self-restraint, patience, and decision, and the institution of the family and the emotions that arise therein, the fierce jealousy, the tenderness for offspring, the parental self-devotion, all found their justification and support in the imminent dangers of the young. Now, where are these imminent dangers? There is a sentiment arising, and it will grow against connubial jealousy, against the fierce maternity, against passion of all sorts. Unnecessary things now, and things that make us uncomfortable. Savage animals discords in a refined and pleasant life. Very long descriptives in this chapter, I guess. I thought of the physical slightness of the people, their lack of intelligence, and those big abundant ruins, and it strengthened my belief in perfect conquest of nature. For after the battle came quiet. Humanity had been strong, energetic, and intelligent, and had used all its abundant vitality to alter the conditions under which it lived. And now came the reaction of the altered conditions. Under the new conditions of perfect comfort and security, that restless energy, that with us is strength, would become weakness. Even in our own time, certain tendencies and desires, once necessary to survive, are a constant source of failure. Physical courage and the love of battle, for instance, are no great help, may even be hindrances to a civilized man, and in a state of physical balance and security, power, intellectual as well as physical, would be out of place. For countless years I judged there had been no danger of war or solitary violence, no danger from wild beasts, no wasting disease to require strength of constitution, no need of toil. For such a life, what we should call the weak are as well equipped as the strong, are indeed no longer weak. Better equipped indeed they are, for the strong would be fretted by an energy for which there was no outlet. No doubt the exquisite beauty of the buildings I saw was the outcome of the last surgings of the now purposeless energy of mankind before it settled down into perfect harmony with the conditions under which it lived. The flourish of that triumph which began the last great peace. This has never been the fate of energy in security. It takes the art to eroticism, and then come languor and decay. Even this artistic impetus would at least die away, had almost died in the time I saw. To adorn themselves with flowers, to dance, to sing in the sunlight, so much was left of the artistic spirit, and no more. Even that would fade in the end to a contented inactivity. We are kept keen on the grindstone of pain and necessity, and it seems to me that here was that hateful grindstone broken at last. As I stood there in the gathering dark, I thought that in this simple explanation I had mastered the problem of the world, mastered the whole secret of these delicious people. Possibly the checks that had devised for the increase of population had succeeded too well, and their numbers had rather diminished than kept stationary. That would account for the abandoned ruins. Very simple was my explanation, and plausible enough, as most wrong these theories are. Dun dun dun. I wonder what he's found, chat. One moment. All right. As I stood there, musing over this too perfect triumph of man, the full moon, yellow and gibbous, came up out of an overflow of silver light in the northeast. The bright little figures ceased to move about below. Below, a noiseless owl fluttered by, and I shivered with the chill of the night. I determined to descend and find where I could sleep. I looked for the building I knew. Then my eye traveled along to the figure of the white sphinx upon the pedestal of bronze, growing distinct as the light of the rising moon grew brighter. I could see the silver birch against it. There was a tangle of rhododendron bushes back in the pale light, and there was the little lawn. I looked at the lawn again. A queer doubt chilled my complacency. No, said I stoutly to myself. That was not the lawn. But it was the lawn. For the white, leprous face of the Sphinx was towards it. Can you imagine what I felt as this conviction came home to me? But you cannot. The time machine was gone. At once, like a lash across the face, came the possibility of losing my own age, of being left helpless in this strange new world. The bare thought of it was an actual physical sensation. I could feel it grip me at the throat and stop my breathing. In another moment, I was in a passion of fear and running with great leaping strides down the slope. Once I fell headlong and cut my face. I lost no time in stanching the blood, but jumped up and ran on, with a warm tickle down my cheek and chin. All the time I ran, I was saying to myself, they have moved it a little, pushed it under the bushes out of the way. Nevertheless, I ran with all my might, all the time with the certainty that sometimes comes with excessive dread. I knew that such assurance was folly, knew instinctively that the machine was removed out of my reach. My breath came with pain. I suppose I covered the whole distance from the hill crest to the little lawn, 2 miles perhaps, in 10 minutes, and I am not a young man. I cursed out loud as I ran at my confident folly in leaving the machine, wasting good breath thereby. I cried aloud, and none answered. Not a creature seemed to be stirring in that moonlight world. When I reached the lawn, my worst fears were realized. Not a trace of the thing was to be seen. I felt faint and cold when I faced the empty space among the black tangle of bushes. I ran round it furiously as if the thing might be hidden in a corner, and then stopped abruptly, with my hands clutching my hair. Above me towered the Sphinx. Upon the bronze pedestal, white, shining, leprous, in the light of the rising moon, it seemed to smile in mockery of my dismay. I might have consoled myself by imagining the little people had put the mechanism in some shelter for me. Had I not felt assured of their physical and intellectual inadequacy. That is what dismayed me. The sense of some hitherto unsuspected power through that through whose intervention my invention had vanished. I'm mixing my words up, sorry. Yet, for one thing I felt assured. Unless some other age had produced its exact duplicate, that machine could not have moved in time. The attachment of the levers, I will show you the method later, prevented anyone from tampering with it in that way when they were removed. It had moved and was hid, only in space. But then, where could it be? I think I must have had a kind of frenzy. I remember running violently in and out among the moonlit bushes all around the Sphinx, and startling some white animal that in the dim light I took for a small deer. I remembered too, late that night, beating the bushes with my clenched fist until my knuckles were gashed and bleeding from the broken twigs. Then, sobbing and raving in my anguish of mind, I went down to the great building of stone. The big hall was dark, silent, and deserted. I slipped upon the uneven floor and fell over one of the malachite tables, almost breaking my shin. I lit a match and went on past the dusty curtains of which I have told you. There I found a second green hall covered in cushions, upon which perhaps a score or so of little people were sleeping. I have no doubt that they found my second appearance strange enough, coming suddenly out of the quiet darkness with inarticulate noises, and the splutter and flare of a match. For they had forgotten about matches. "Where is my time machine?" I began, bawling like an angry child, laying my hands upon them and shaking them up together. It must have been very queer to them. Some laughed, most of them looked sorely frightened. When I saw them standing around me, it came into my head that I was doing as foolish a thing as it was possible for me to do under the circumstances, in trying to revive the sensation of fear. For, reasoning from their day-lit behavior, I thought that fear must be forgotten. A moth made it into my rooms. I got distracted there. Abruptly, I dashed down the match and, knocking one of the people over in my course, went blundering across the big dining hall again. Out under the moonlight, I heard cries of terror. Their little feet running and stumbling this way and that. I do not remember all I did as the moon crept up the sky. I suppose it was unexpected. It was the unexpected nature of my loss that maddened me. I felt hopelessly cut off from my own kind, a strange animal in an unknown world. I must have raved to and fro, screaming and crying upon God and fate. I have a memory of horrible fatigue as the long night of despair wore away, of looking in this impossible place, and that of groping among the moonlit ruins and touching strange creatures in black shadows. At last, of laying on the ground near the Sphinx and weeping with absolute wretchedness. I had nothing left but misery. Then I slept, and when I woke against it was full day, and a couple of sparrows were hopping around me on the turf within reach of my arm. I sat up in the freshness of morning, trying to remember how I had got there, and why I had such a profound sense of desertion and despair. Then things came clear in my mind. With the plain, reasonable daylight, I could look my circumstances fairly in the face. I saw the wild folly of my frenzy overnight, and I could reason with myself. Suppose the worst, I said. Suppose the machine altogether lost, perhaps destroyed? It behooves me to be calm and patient, to learn the way of the people, to get a clear idea of my method of my loss, and the means of getting materials and tools, so that in the end perhaps I may make another. That would be my only hope, perhaps, but better than despair. And, after all, it was a beautiful and curious world. But, probably, the machine had only been taken away. Still, I must be calm and patient, find its hiding place, and recover it by force or cunning. And with that, I scrambled to my feet and looked about me, wondering where I could bathe. I felt weary, stiff, and travel-soiled. The freshness of the morning made me desire an equal freshness. I had exhausted my emotion. Indeed, as I went about my business, I found myself wondering at my intense excitement overnight. I made a careful examination of the ground about the little lawn. I wasted some time in futile questioning, conveyed as well as I was able to such of the little people as came by. They all failed to understand my gestures. Some were simply stolid. Some thought it was a jest and laughed at me. I had the hardest task in the world to keep my hands off their pretty laughing faces. It was a foolish impulse, but the devil begotten of fear and blind anger was ill curbed and still eager to take advantage of my perplexity. The turf gave better counsel. I found a groove ripped in it, about midway between the pedestal of the Sphinx and the marks of my feet, where, on arrival, I had struggled with the overturned machine. There were other signs of removal about, with queer, narrow footprints like those I could imagine made by a sloth. This directed my closer attention to the pedestal. It was, as I think I said, of bronze. It was not a mere block, but highly decorated with deep framed panels on either side. I went and rapped at these. The pedestal was hollow. Examining the panels with care, I found them discontinuous with the frames. There were no handles or keyholes, but possibly the panels, if they were doors as I supposed, opened from within. One thing was clear enough to my mind. It took no very great mental effort to infer that my time machine was inside that pedestal. But how it got there was a different problem. I saw the heads of two orange-clad people coming through the bushes and under some blossom-covered apple trees towards me. I turned smiling to them and beckoned them to me. They came, and then pointing to the bronze pedestal, I tried to imitate my wish to open it. But at my first gesture towards this, they behaved very oddly. I don't know how to convey their expression to you. Suppose you were to use a grossly improper gesture to delicate-minded woman. It was how she would look. They went off as if they had received the last possible insult. I tried a sweet-looking little chap in white next, with exactly the same result. Somehow, his inner manner made me feel ashamed of myself. But, as you know, I wanted the time machine, and I tried once more. As he turned off like the others, my temper got the better of me. In 3 strides, I was after him. I had him by the loose part of his robe around the neck, and began dragging him towards the Sphinx. Then I saw the horror and repugnance of his face, and all of a sudden I let him go. But I was not beaten yet. I banged with my fist at the bronze panels. I thought I heard something stir inside. To be explicit, I thought I heard a sound like a chuckle, but I must have been mistaken. Then I got a big pebble from the river and came and hammered till I flattened a coil in the decorations, and the verdigris came off in powdery flakes. The delicate little pebble must have heard me hammering in gusty outbreaks a mile away on either hand, but nothing came of it. Ah, people, not pebble, my bad. I saw a crowd of them upon the slopes looking furtively at me. At last, hot and tired, I sat down to watch the place, but I was too restless to watch long. I am too occidental for a long vigil. I could work at a problem for years, but to wait inactively for 24 hours, that is another matter. I got up after a time and began walking aimlessly through the bushes towards the hill again. Patience, I said to myself, if you want your machine again, you must leave that Sphinx alone. If they mean to take your machine away, it's little good. You're wrecking their bronze panels, and if you don't, they will get it back as soon as you can ask for it. To sit among all those unknown things before a puzzle like that is hopeless. That way lies monomania. Face this world, learn its ways, watch it, be careful of too hasty guesses at its meaning. In the end, you will find clues to it all. Then suddenly the humor of the situation came into my mind. The thought of the years I had spent in study and toil to get into the future age, and now my passion of anxiety to get out of it. I had made myself the most complicated and most hopeless trap that ever a man devised. Although it was my own expense, I could not help myself. I laughed out loud. Thank you for the follow. And one moment, because my foot fell asleep and it's making me go crazy. Hold on. I'm sorry.
cupola, cupola.
I hit the mute button? When did that happen? How much have... Oh no, how much has been missed? Oh my god. Oh my god, chat, how could you... No one... Oh no. No. When did I get muted? Oh my god, are you kidding me? I'm so sorry. I didn't even know I muted when I got out of my chair for 2 seconds. Oh no. I'm not sure how to fix this. I don't know when I muted myself. I guess I'll just sum up what I've read in the last 15 minutes. We have been exploring the future world, and he has discovered shafts in which air is being sucked into, and he's pondering how the inhabitants of this world have been able to live and get new clothes and sandals, and where all the old people are. That is the summary of the last 15 minutes of reading. I'm so sorry. And I'll just continue reading now. Then again, about the time machine, something I knew not what had taken it into the hollow pedestal of the White Sphinx. Why? For the life of me, I could not imagine. Those waterless wells, too, those flickering pillars, I felt lacked a clue. I felt, how shall I put it? Suppose you found an inscription with sentences here and there in excellent plain English, and interpolated therewith others made up of vowels, of letters even, absolutely unknown to you. Well, on the 3rd day of my visit, that was how the world of 802,701 presented itself to me. That day, I made a friend of sort. It happened that, as I was watching some little people bathing in a shallow, one of them was seized with cramp and began drifting downstream. The main current ran rather swiftly, but not too strongly for even a moderate swimmer. It will give you an idea, therefore, of the strange deficiency in these creatures when I tell you that none made the slightest attempt to rescue the weakly crying little thing which was drowning before my eyes. When I realized this, I hurriedly slipped off my clothes, and, wading in at a point lower down, I caught the poor mite and drew her safely to land. A little rubbing of the limbs soon brought her round, and I had the satisfaction of seeing she was all right before I left her. I had got such a low estimate of her kind that I did not expect any gratitude from her. In that, however, I was wrong. This happened in the morning. In the afternoon, I met my little woman, as I believed it was. I was returning toward my center from an exploration, and she received me with cries of delight and presented me with a big garland of flowers, evidently made for me and me alone. The thing took my imagination. Very possibly I had been feeling desolate. At any rate, I did my best to display my appreciation of the gift. We were soon seated together in a little stone arbor, engaging in conversation, chiefly of smiles. The creature's friendliness affected me exactly as a child's might have done. We passed each other flowers, and she kissed my hands. I did the same to hers. Then I tried to talk and found that her name was Weena, which, though I don't know what it meant, somehow seemed appropriate enough. That was the beginning of a queer friendship which lasted a week and ended, as I will tell you. She was exactly like a child. She wanted to be with me always. She tried to follow me everywhere, and on my next journey out about, it went to my heart to tire her down and leave her at last, exhausted and calling after me rather plaintively. But the problems of the world had to be mastered. Problems of the world had to be mastered. I had not, I said to myself, come into the future to carry on a miniature flirtation. Yet her distress when I left her was very great. Her expostulations, expostulations at the parting were sometimes frantic. And I think, altogether, I had as much trouble as comfort from her devotion. Nevertheless, she was somehow a very great comfort. I thought it was mere childish affection that made her cling to me, until it was too late. I did not clearly know I had inflicted upon her when I left her, nor until it was too late did I clearly understand that she was to me. For by merely seeming fond of me, and showing in her weak, futile way that she cared for me, the little doll of the creature presently gave my return to the neighborhood of the White Sphinx almost the feeling of coming home. And I would watch for her tiny figure of white and gold so soon as I came over the hill. It was from her, too, that I learned that fear had not yet left the world. She was fearless enough in the daylight, and she had the oddest confidence in me. For once, in a foolish moment, I made threatening grimaces at her, and she simply laughed at them. But she dreaded the dark, dreaded shadows, dreaded black things. Darkness to her was one thing dreadful. It was a singularly passionate emotion, and it set me thinking and observing. I discovered then, among the things, that these little people gathered into the great houses after dark, and slept in droves. To enter upon them without a light was to put them into a tumult of apprehension. I never found one out of doors, nor one sleeping alone within the doors after dark. Yet I was still such a blockhead that I missed the lesson of that fear, and in spite of Weena's distress, I insisted upon sleeping away from these slumbering multitudes. It troubled her greatly, but in the end her odd affection for me triumphed, and for 5 of the nights of our acquaintance, including the last night of all, she slept with her head pillowed on my arm. But my story slips away from me as I speak of her. It must have been the night before her rescue that I was awakened without dawn. I had been restless, dreaming most disagreeably that I was drowned, and that sea anemones were feeling over my face with their soft palps. I woke with a start, and with an odd fancy that some grayish animal had just rushed out of the chamber. When I tried to sleep again, but I felt restless and uncomfortable. I'm inserting words into the story now. It was that dim gray hour when things are just creeping out of the darkness, when everything is colorless and clear-cut and yet unreal. I got up and went down to the great hall, and so out upon the flagstones in front of the palace. I thought I would make a virtue of necessity and see the sunrise. The moon was setting, and the dying moonlight and the first pallor of dawn were mingled in ghastly half-light. The bushes were inky black, the ground a somber gray, the sky colorless and cheerless. And up the hill I thought I could see ghosts. There were several times as I scanned the slope I saw white figures. Twice I fancied I saw a solitary white ape-like creature running rather quickly up the hill, and once near the ruins I saw a leash of them carrying some dark body. They moved hastily. I did not see what became of them. It seemed that they vanished among the bushes. The dawn was still indistinct, you must understand. It was feeling that chill, uncertain, early morning feeling you may have known. I doubted my eyes. As the eastern sky grew brighter and the light of the day came on and its vivid coloring returned upon the world once more, I scanned the view keenly. But I saw no vestige of my white figures. They were mere creatures of half-light. They must have been ghosts, I said. I wonder whence they dated. For a queer notion of Grant Allen's name into my head and amused me. If each generation die and leave ghosts, he argued, the world at last will be overcrowded with them. On that theory, they would have grown innumerable from 800,000 years hence, and it was no great wonder to see four at once. But the jest was unsatisfying, and I was thinking of these figures all the morning. Until Weena's rescue drove them out of my head, I associated them in some indefinite way with the white animal I had startled in my first passionate search for the time machine. But Weena was a pleasant substitute. Yet all the same, they were soon destined to take far deadlier possessions of my mind. I think I have said how much hotter than our own the weather of this golden age. I cannot account for it. It may be that the sun was hotter, or the earth nearer the sun. It is unusual to assume the sun will go on cooling steadily in the future, but people unfamiliar with such speculations as those of the younger Darwin forget that the planet must ultimately fall back one by one into the parent body. As these catastrophes occur, the sun will blaze with renewed energy, and it may be that some inner planet had suffered this fate. Whatever the reason, the fact remains that the sun was very much hotter than we know it. Well, one very hot morning, my fourth, I think, as I was seeking shelter from the heat and glare in a colossal ruin near the great house where I slept and fed, there happened this strange thing. Clambering among these heaps of masonry, I found a narrow gallery, whose end and side windows were blocked by fallen masses of stone. By contrast with the brilliancy outside, it seemed at first impenetrably dark to me. I entered it groping, for the change from light to blackness made spots of color swim before me. Suddenly I halted spellbound. A pair of eyes, luminous by reflection against the daylight without, was watching me out of the darkness. The old instinctive dread of wild beasts came upon me. I clenched my hands and steadily looked into the glaring eyeballs. I was afraid to turn. Then the thought of absolute security in which humanity appeared to be living came to mind, and then I remembered strange terror of the dark. Overcoming my fear to some extent, I advanced a step and spoke. I will admit that my voice was harsh and ill-controlled. I put out my hand and touched something soft. At once the eyes darted sideways, and something white ran past me. I turned with my heart in my mouth and saw a queer little ape-like figure. its head held down in a peculiar manner, running across the sunlit space behind me. It blundered against a block of granite, staggered aside, and in a moment was hidden in black shadow beneath the pile of ruined masonry. My impression of it is, of course, imperfect, but I know it was a dull white, and had strange, large, grayish-red eyes. Also that there was flaxen hair on its head and down its back. But as I say, I went too fast. It went too fast for me to see distinctively. I cannot even say whether it was on all fours, or only with its forearms held very low. After an instant's pause, I followed it into the second heap of ruins. I could not find it at first, but after a time in the profound obscurity, I came upon one of those round, well-liked openings of which I have told you, half closed by a fallen pillar. A sudden thought came to me. Could this thing have vanished down the shaft? I lit a match, and looking down, I saw a small, white-moving creature with large bright eyes, which regarded me steadfastly as it retreated. It made me shudder. It was so like a human spider. It was like clambering down the wall, and now I saw for the first time a number of metal foot and hand rests forming a kind of ladder down the shaft. Then the light burned my fingers and fell out of my hand, going out as it dropped, and when I had lit another, the little monster had disappeared. How much longer do we have in this chapter? Oh my gosh. I do not know how long I sat peering down that well. It was not for some time that I could succeed in persuading myself that the thing I had seen was human. But gradually, the truth dawned on me that man had not remained one species, but had differentiated into two distinct animals. That my graceful children of the upper world were not sole descendants of our generation, but that this bleached, obscene, nocturnal thing, which had flashed before me, was also heir to all the ages. I thought of the flickering pillars and of my theory of an underground ventilation. I began to suspect their true import. And what, I wondered, was this lemur doing in my scheme of a perfectly balanced organization? How was it related to the indolent serenity of the beautiful upper worldlers? And what was hidden down there at the foot of that shaft? I sat upon the edge of the well, telling myself that, at any rate, there was nothing to fear, and that there I must descend for the solution of my difficulties. And withal, I was absolutely afraid to go. Oh, thank you for the sub. Thank you for the resub, Claudia. Oh my goodness, thank you. I hope that my voice is at least relaxing right now. My throat's getting a little harsh, so I might end the stream soon. Really, thank you. Thanks for returning the favor. As I hesitated, two of the beautiful upper world people came running in their amorous sport across the daylight in the shadow. The male pursued the female, flinging flowers at her as he ran. They seemed distressed to find me, my arm against the overturned pillar, peering down the well. Apparently, it was considered bad form to remark these apertures, for when I pointed to this one and tried to frame a question about it in their tongue, they still more visibly distressed and turned away. But they were interested by my matches, and I struck some to amuse them. I tried them again about the well, and again I failed. So presently I left them, meaning to go back to Weena and see what I could get from her. but my mind was already in revolution. My guesses and impressions were slipping and sliding into a new adjustment. I now had a clue to the import of these wells, to the ventilating towers, to the mystery of the ghosts, to say nothing of a hint at the meaning of the bronze gates and the fate of the time machine. And very vaguely there came a suggestion towards the solution of the economic problem that had puzzled me. We could finish this chapter, yeah. Here was the view. Plainly, the second species of man was subterranean. There were three circumstances in particular which made me think that its rare emergence above the ground was the outcome of a long-continued underground habit. In the first place, there was the bleached look common in most animals that live largely in the dark. The white fish of the Kentucky caves, for instance. Then, those large eyes with that capacity for reflecting light are common features of nocturnal things. Witness the owl and the cat. And last of all, that evident confusion in the sunshine, that hasty yet fumbling awkward flight towards the dark shadows, and that peculiar carriage of the head while in the light, all reinforce the theory of an extreme sensitiveness of the retina. Beneath my feet, then, the earth must be tunneled enamorously, and these tunnelings were the habitat of the new race. The presence of ventilating shafts and wells among the hill slopes, everywhere in fact except along the river valley, showed how universal were its ramifications. What so natural, then, as to assume that it was in this artificial underworld that such work as was necessary to the comfort of the daylight race was done? The notion was so plausible that I at once accepted it, and went on to assume the how of the splitting of the human species. I dare say you will anticipate the shape of my theory, though for myself I very soon felt that it fell short of the truth. At first, proceeding from the problems of our own age, it seemed clear as daylight to me that the gradual widening of the present merely temporary and social difference between the capitalist and the laborer was the key to the whole position. No doubt it will seem grotesque enough to you, and wildly incredible. Wildly. And yet, even now, there are existing circumstances to point that way. There is a tendency to utilize underground spaces for the less ornamental purposes of civilization. There is the Metropolitan Railway in London, for instance. There are new electronic railways. There are subways. There are underground workrooms and restaurants, and they increase and multiply. Evidently, I thought, this tendency had increased till industry had gradually lost birthright in the sky. I mean that it had gone deeper and deeper into larger and even larger underground factories, spending a still increasing amount of its time therein, till, in the end, even now, does not an East End worker live in such artificial conditions as practically to be cut off from the natural surface of the earth? I'm losing stamina really fast, I'm sorry. Goodness, there's quite a bit left here, hold on. Again, the exclusive tendency of richer people due no doubt to the increasing refinement of their education, and the widening gulf between them and the rude violence of the poor is already lending to the closing, in their interest, of considerable portions of the surface of the land. About London, for instance, perhaps half the prettier country is shut in against the intrusion. And this same widening gulf, which is due to the length and expense of the higher educational process, and the increased facilities for and temptations towards refined habits on the part of the rich, will make that exchange between class and class, that promotion by intermarriage, which at present retards and the splitting of our species along the lines of social stratifications, less and less frequent. So in the end, above ground you must have the haves, the pursuing pleasure and comfort and beauty, and below ground the have-nots. The haves and have-nots, sorry. The workers getting continually adapted to the conditions of their labor. Once they were there, they would no doubt have to pay rent, and not a little of it, for the ventilation of their caverns, and if they refused, they would starve to or be suffocated for arrears. Such of them as were so constituted as to be miserable and rebellious would die, and in the end, the balance of being permanent, the survivors would become as well adapted to the conditions of underground life, and as happy as their way as the upper world people were to theirs. It seemed to me the refined beauty and etiolated pallor followed naturally enough. Yeah, suddenly society. The great triumph of humanity I had dreamed of took a different shape in my mind. It had been no such triumph of moral education and general cooperation as I had imagined. Instead, I saw a real aristocracy, armed with a perfected science and working to a logical conclusion to the industrial system of today. Its triumph had not been simply a triumph over nature, but a triumph over nature and the fellow man. This, I must warn you, was my theory at the time. I had no convenient cicerone in the pattern of the utopian books. My explanation may be absolutely wrong. I still think it is the most plausible one. But even on this supposition, the balanced civilization that was at last attained must have long since passed its zenith, and was now far fallen into decay. The too perfected security of the upper worlders have led them to a slow movement of degradation, to a general dwindling in size, strength, and intelligence, that I could see clearly enough already. What had happened to the undergrounders I did not yet suspect, but from what I had seen of the Morlocks, that, by the by, was the name by which these creatures were called, I could imagine that the modification of the human type was even far more profound among the Eloi, the beautiful race that I had already known. Then came the troublesome doubts. Why had the Morlocks taken my time machine? For I felt sure it was they who had taken it. Why, too, if the Eloi were masters, could they not restore the machine to me? And why were they so terribly afraid of the dark? I proceeded, as I had said, to question Weena about the underworld, but here again I was disappointed. At first she would not understand my questions, and Presently, she refused to answer them. She shivered as though the topic was unendurable, and when I pressed her, perhaps a little too harshly, she burst into tears. They were the only tears, except my own, I ever saw in that golden age. When I saw them, I ceased abruptly to trouble about the Morlocks, and was only concerned in banishing these signs of the human inheritance from Weena's eyes. And very soon she was smiling and clapping her hands while I solemnly burned a match. Alright, I think we're gonna go ahead and then end it off there. The next chapter is chapter 6. And for the time being, yes, we're gonna end it there. I'm getting tired. My voice is getting tired. And my brain's stopping work. My brain no work anymore. Alright. So, I'm gonna send you guys off to someone else here. Let me see what is going on here. Where is the ASMR tab? I don't see it. Well, let's see, is anyone else streaming right now? Oh, that's just let's see. Let's see who's on the ASMR tab at the moment. It scares me to go to this tab because I know it's rather, not safe for work. Well, I can't quite find anyone. I don't think that I want to send you guys over to. So I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream here. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Make sure to follow my Twitter for my schedule update, or you can join my Discord and get the updates there. Alright? Have a great night. See ya. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.